Hello and welcome to Intriguing Realms. Devon in England is particularly rich in supernatural legends. The bleakness of Dartmoor has given rise to numerous tales of spirits and entities. But this is the tale of a particularly hostile manifestation. It is the legend of the hairy hands. The entity is confined to a particular narrow stretch of moorland road between the villages of Postbridge and Princetown. It's now known as the B3212. There are many accounts of encounters with this malevolent spirit. A typical story usually starts when driving along this road on a cold, dark night. Suddenly, a gruesome pair of hairy, calloused hands appears from nowhere and grabs the wheel, trying to steer you off the road with inhuman strength. The first incident was in June 1921, when E.H. Helby, a medical officer at Dartmoor Prison, was killed as his motorcycle became uncontrollable and crashed. His children were in the sidecar, and they told the story of their father wrestling with the controls, shouting at them to jump out. They jumped clear, but the father crashed and didn't survive. Several weeks later, a coach driver lost control of his vehicle, and several people were thrown out of their seats. The driver claimed invisible hands wrenched control of the steering wheel. On the 26th of August, 1921, an army captain on a motorcycle with a pillion passenger was driven off the road at the same spot. The passenger insisted he saw large hairy hands grab the handlebars and steer them off the road. The London papers picked up on the story, and it became nationwide news. The captain described the experience.
"It was not my fault. Believe it or not, something drove me off the road. A pair of hairy hands closed over mine. I felt them as plainly as ever I felt anything in my life. Large, muscular, hairy hands. I fought them for all I was worth, but they were too strong for me. They forced the machine into the turf at the edge of the road, and I knew no more till I came to myself, lying a few feet away on my face on the turf."
In 1924, a young couple were camping in a caravan near this road, and the woman was woken in the middle of the night by a sudden terror.
I knew there was some power very seriously menacing us near, and I must act very swiftly. As I looked up to the little window at the end of the caravan, I saw something moving, and as I stared, I saw it was the fingers and palm of a very large hand, with many hairs on the joints and back of it, clawing up and up to the top of the window, which was a little open. I knew it wished to do harm to my husband sleeping below. I knew that the owner of the hand hated us and wished harm, and I knew it was no ordinary hand, and that no blow or shot would have any power over it. Almost unconsciously, I made the sign of the cross, and I prayed very much that we might be kept safe. At once the hand slowly sank down out of sight, and I knew the danger was gone. I did say a thankful prayer and fell at once into a peaceful sleep. We stayed in that spot for several weeks, but I never felt the evil influence again near the caravan. But I did not feel happy in some places not far off, and would not for anything have walked alone on the moor at night or on the tor above our caravan.
In the following years, the stretch of road became notorious for accidents. Survivors, if there were any, told of the large, rough hands covered in hair trying to force them off the road. In some cases, the hands were invisible. This could happen to cars, motor coaches, cyclists, and even pony and traps. Journalist and author Rufus Endell claimed he experienced the hands while driving near Postbridge.
"A pair of hands gripped the driving wheel, and I had to fight for control. I managed to avoid a crash, and the hands disappeared as inexplicably as they had come."
The account was published in a book on supernatural Dartmoor, but he requested that the story wouldn't be published until after his death. Another anonymous account was posted online.
"I live on the road that goes toward Princetown, but I've heard it happen to people elsewhere in Devon. My uncle was working late for a builder when he got held up and came home a different way and had to go down that road. He was driving a small van and said it was very dark, and at first he felt like the van was being followed or someone was watching him and just felt spooked anyway. Then he thinks he saw someone on the side of the road, but he knew no one was there. When he went further down the road, he felt his van grabbed like by a force, and he could not keep the steering wheel straight, so he was going to go into the side of the road. He is a builder and a big, strong man, not a weakling, and was trying to turn the wheel as hard as he could, but no way. Then he felt something on the wheel, and looked down, as his eyes were just on the road till then, and saw a pair of large hands covered in hair on the wheel grabbing it and pushing the other way. His van went up on the verge and banged hard onto the grass moor and almost wound up hitting a tree, but stopped. Just then, the hands disappeared, but he was really scared. Luckily, someone came up the road a few minutes later behind him in another car and stopped to see he was all right, as he was up on the bank so had clearly come off the road. And he was all right, but was in shock. My uncle still swears blind that this happened to him, and he is not someone who admits to things like this. That was 20 years ago, but he did not know about the story of hairy hands till he was told about it.
The origins of the hands are not known, and the only motive seems to be to drive motorists off the road. As with any legend, they can become embellished over time on retelling. With no clear backstory, storytellers add their own details. Some local stories attribute them to an unnamed man who died in an accident on the road, or to an escaped convict from Dartmoor prison. It's also been suggested that the strange Dartmoor beast is the original owner. One American website alleges that sightings of Bigfoot-type humanoids have been reported in the area. Another tale is that a Bronze Age village stood on the road, so the hands are angry at their resting place being disturbed. Or my personal favorite.
A chap worked at the gunpowder factory at Powder Mills. He went to work in hobnailed boots that sparked on the stone floor, igniting the gunpowder which killed him, leaving nothing but his hands, which now terrorized the road.
Legends of disembodied hands are not confined to the UK. An American man called John Berry, reading the tale online in 2020, was shocked to see the similarity with his own experience driving in New York State.
When it happened to me, I was driving north, all alone at night on Route 390 in New York State. It was a particularly hot evening, and so I had my driver's side window rolled down. It was early summer, and the year was 1987. For miles, both in front and behind me, it seemed like I was the only vehicle on the entire highway. I remember feeling very calm, and if anything, a bit bored. Suddenly things got very interesting. From literally out of nowhere, two disembodied, large, white-skinned hands reached in through my open driver's side window. The knuckles and fingers of the hands were large, and the backs of both hands had a growth of long white hairs. These hands were physically powerful. Their grip was like that of a mechanical vice. The hairy hands grabbed the top right portion of the steering wheel and immediately proceeded to push down, hard, and to the right. The center of the steering wheel, for that model and year of car, had the usual horizontal V partition, extending both left and right, that connected with the outer circle portion of the steering wheel. Somehow, my reflexes responded instantly. Somehow, I got the open palm of my right hand positioned directly underneath the steering wheel that extended to the right, and I got my right elbow propped directly on top of my right knee. With the additional assistance of my left hand, I started cranking counterclockwise on the right V of the steering wheel, just as if it were a breaker bar socket wrench. For several seconds, I, using both hands and my right knee, arm wrestled against the vice-like strength of the hairy hands. Somehow I managed to keep the car going straight, although I was now traveling down the right shoulder of the highway, as if it were a lane. Just the same, the hairy hands were slowly succeeding to steer me into the ditch, when, very suddenly, the hairy hands retracted back out through the open driver's side window. My car then lurched, hard to the left, as a result of my oversteering counterclockwise. Somehow I got it together, avoided crashing, and resumed traveling straight down the appropriate highway lane. Until today, I never told anyone about what had happened.
In Welsh folklore, there is a story about a man called Roberts. Instead of attending church on Sunday, Roberts went gathering nuts in the nearby fields. When he saw a plentiful supply on a bush, he was just about to reach out when a disembodied hand appeared. Roberts assumed that the hand was the devil's own and mended his ways. In Mexico, there is the legend of La Mano Peluda, hairy hand, or Mano Pachona, furry hand. A Mayan shaman was killed during the Inquisition in Mexico. He was chopped up and buried in an old Native American cemetery, but before his death, he had cast a spell on his hand so that it would come to life to hunt his inquisitors. The legend is used to scare children, and the hands are said to lurk under the beds of naughty children, hoping to grab their ankle and drag them away if they refuse to sleep. Skeptics insist that most of the accidents on the road have been caused by grockles or tourists unfamiliar with the area, driving too fast down narrow country roads with high-walled sides, resulting in them losing control. It was eventually determined that the accidents were most likely due to the camber of the road's surface, and this was duly altered by the local council. There is also another possible influence on the legend. The French fantasy novel The Hands of Orlac by Maurice Renard was first published in 1920, the year before the first incident. In the novel, a pianist loses his hands in an accident. A talented surgeon gives him new hands, transplanted from a freshly guillotined killer, but they take on a malevolent life of their own. Perhaps this book, which was later a silent film, had captured the imagination of the population. Whatever the origins, the sheer number of reports and their striking similarity can't be disputed. So if you find yourself on the moors on a cold, dark night, perhaps set a route that avoids that particular stretch of road. Have you heard stories of the hairy hands? Or have you been unfortunate enough to have a similar experience? Tell us on IntriguingRealms@gmail.com. And as always, sweet dreams.